For months, the world has been talking again about the Epstein files. Powerful names, hidden networks, documents that many people believed would never see the light of day. But here is the real question that almost no one seems to be asking. Why are they releasing this information now? Why at this exact moment in history? Because when powerful institutions suddenly allow secrets to surface, it usually means one or two things. Either something slipped through the cracks, or the release itself serves a purpose. And if history has taught us anything, it is that information is rarely revealed without a reason. Some people believe these revelations are simply the exposure of corruption. Others believe they are a distraction. But there is another possibility that almost no one is talking about. What if moments like this appear during periods of massive human transition? For thousands of years, civilizations have spoken about cycles of time, moments when humanity enters a new era of awareness. Some call it awakening, others call it transformation. Astrologers have long referred to this moment as the Age of Aquarius, a time when hidden knowledge surfaces, power structures begin to crack, and people start asking questions they were once afraid to ask. But there is also a darker interpretation, because the same systems that reveal information can also manipulate it. Psychologists call this something known as the observer effect. The idea that what we focus our attention on begins to shape our perception of reality, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if certain revelations are not meant to wake people up, but to overwhelm them, to flood the public with scandal, outrage, and shock until the deeper questions disappear beneath the noise? Because once people become emotionally consumed by headlines, they stop looking for patterns. And the patterns are where the real story begins. In my book, The Eve Gene, Awakening Divine Femininity, I explore how ancient civilizations believed humanity once possessed a deeper understanding of consciousness, power, and the unseen forces shaping our world. And one of the most disturbing patterns that appears again and again across history is this. Truth is rarely hidden forever, but it is often released in ways that keep people from seeing the bigger picture. So the real question may not be what is inside the Epstein files. The real question may be why moments like this keep appearing throughout history, right when humanity begins asking deeper questions about who we are and what we've forgotten. They forget the sacred questions. They forget the dangerous questions. Questions like, what is consciousness? What is the true nature of power? Why do the same patterns of corruption repeat under different names? Why are certain lands restricted? Why are certain truths considered untouchable? Why does history feel so fragmented? Why do so many people feel like they are living inside a reality that has been partially edited? This is why topics like holy lands, forbidden zones, Antarctica, hidden archives, and supernatural human abilities keep pulling people in. Because even if they do not yet fully understand those topics, they can feel that they point towards something larger. They point toward the possibility that reality is not as simple as we were trained to believe. Take holy lands, for example. Why have certain regions of Earth carried such unusual spiritual, military, political, and historical importance for thousands of years? Why do some places feel symbolic far beyond their geography? Why do empires fight over the same land again and again? Why do ancient traditions describe specific mountains, deserts, temples, and territories as thresholds between worlds? To the modern mind, this can sound like myth, but to ancient people, land was never just land, it was memory, it was energy, it was covenant, it was access. And when you begin seeing land that way, history itself starts to feel different. Then there is Antarctica, a place that sits at the edge of the world in modern imagination. A place surrounded by treaties, restrictions, scientific control, and endless mystery. Maybe the official explanation is enough for some people, but for many others, Antarctica symbolizes something larger. It symbolizes the possibility that parts of this earth are still hidden behind gates, that not all knowledge is publicly available, that not all territory is equally accessible. And when people feel that possibility, it reactivates an ancient instinct, the instinct that says, what else don't we know? What else has been buried beneath policy, secrecy, and narrative control? Then come the deeper spiritual questions, forbidden knowledge, hidden truth, entities, different star systems, ancient beings, reptilian symbolism, supernatural powers. A lot of people hear topics like that and immediately shut down, but the deeper reason people are drawn to them is not always because they believe every detail literally. Often, they are drawn to them because those ideas symbolize something the modern world refuses to address. That evil may be more intelligent than we want to admit. That corruption may be more organized than we want to admit. That human beings may be more spiritually gifted than we were taught. And that the struggle between truth and deception may be happening on more than one level at the same time. Political, psychological, spiritual, energetic. And that is where this conversation gets real. Because whether someone uses the word satanic, evil, demonic, predatory, parasitic, reptilian, or corrupt, the emotional intuition underneath is often the same. They are trying to describe a pattern of intelligence that feeds on deception, domination, exploitation, and spiritual disconnection. A pattern that shows up in abusive people. A pattern that shows up in criminal networks. A pattern that shows up in institutions. A pattern that shows up anywhere power is cut off from conscience. That pattern is old. Older than headlines, older than governments, older than empires. And maybe that is why ancient stories describe monsters, false gods, deceivers, archons, watchers, serpents, and shadow forces. Not necessarily because every story was literal in the same way, but because ancient people were trying to describe a reality modern language still struggles to explain. How do you explain evil that hides behind beauty? How do you explain intelligence without integrity? How do you explain systems that feed on innocence while pretending to protect it? How do you explain corruption that survives generation after generation? Maybe that is why so many people feel pulled toward forbidden knowledge in the first place. They are trying to understand what kind of force keeps breaking the human world in the same ways. And once a person begins asking those questions, another layer opens. Because the opposite of corruption is not merely law, it is consciousness. The opposite of manipulation is awareness. The opposite of spiritual attack is inner clarity. And that brings us to the part of this conversation most people overlook, our supernatural powers. Some people hear that phrase and think fantasy, but maybe the real issue is that modern society has made us uncomfortable with our own depth. What if intuition is real? What if discernment is deeper than logic? What if the human nervous system can detect danger long before the conscious mind explains it? What if attention shapes reality more than we realize? What if the mind, body, and spirit are capable of far more than what industrial society rewards? Ancient traditions taught that human beings were not empty, they were endowed. They carried spiritual inheritance. They carried inner sight. They carried creative force. They carried memory. They carried the ability to align with higher truth or lower deception. And maybe that is the real forbidden knowledge. Not that evil exists. Most people already know that. Maybe the forbidden knowledge is that human beings are far more powerful, intuitive, and spiritually significant than the modern world wants them to believe. Because a person who believes they are nothing becomes easy to program, easy to distract, easy to exploit, easy to seduce, easy to own. But a person who begins remembering their own awareness, their own inner authority, and their own discernment becomes much harder to capture. That is why this conversation matters. Because it is not really about one scandal. It is not really about one island. It is not really about one file release. Those are doorways. What matters is what those doorways reveal. That systems protect themselves. That truth gets delayed. That corruption often travels in networks. That history is layered. That hidden knowledge exists in fragments. And that awakening begins the moment a person stops reacting to headlines and starts reading patterns. Maybe that is why you're here. Maybe you are tired of surface level explanations. Maybe you are tired of being told what to think before you have had the chance to think for yourself. Maybe you are tired of a world that talks constantly but rarely reveals anything. Maybe you are tired of being fed noise while deeper questions stay untouched. If so, then you are not crazy, you are paying attention. And paying attention is where everything begins. Because the world does not only suffer from corruption, It suffers from disconnection, disconnection from truth, disconnection from history, disconnection from spirit, disconnection from the inner power that allows a human being to see clearly. That is why awakening feels so intense at first, because when a person starts seeing patterns, they often feel anger, grief, shock, confusion, sometimes fear, because illusions can feel comforting until they crack. But the crack is not the end. It is the beginning of discernment, the beginning of remembrance, the beginning of a new relationship with reality. And maybe the deepest truth of all is this: the world has spent centuries teaching human beings to fear evil without teaching them enough about their own inner light. It has taught people to fear darkness without fully teaching them how powerful awareness really is. It has taught people about control without fully teaching them about consciousness. And maybe that imbalance is exactly what now has to change. So no, this is not just about Epstein. It is not just about files. It is not just about elites. It is not just about governments. It is about the repeating structure underneath all of it. A structure built on secrecy, fear, manipulation, and disconnection. And it is about the ancient truth that can interrupt that structure. Awareness, discernment, memory, inner power, the courage to ask deeper questions, and the willingness to keep asking them even when the world prefers sleep. So let me leave you with this. Maybe the hidden truth is not only that darkness organized itself. Maybe the hidden truth is also that human consciousness has always carried the power to see through it. Maybe the forbidden knowledge is not only what they hid. Maybe it is what you are capable of once you begin remembering. And maybe that is why this message found you now. Because something in you was already ready to question, ready to notice, ready to remember, ready to see the world not just as it appears, but as a pattern waiting to be read. And this is exactly why I'm writing the Eve Gene, Awakening Divine Femininity. Not simply to talk about history, corruption, or hidden networks, but to explore a deeper question. What if humanity has always carried a forgotten inheritance? An inheritance of awareness, intuition, and spiritual intelligence that ancient cultures once understood far better than we do today. Throughout the Eve Gene, I explore the idea that divine feminine wisdom, intuition, discernment, and consciousness has always been one of the greatest threats to systems built on deception and control. Because the moment people reconnect with their inner awareness, manipulation becomes harder, lies become easier to see, patterns become impossible to ignore, and history begins to reveal itself differently. So if these ideas resonate with you, if you've ever felt that there is more to this world than what we are told, then the journey does not end here. It is only beginning. And that journey continues in the Eve Gene, Awakening Divine Femininity.